Consider an interesting example of anger in Scripture. And what I want to focus on here is the different ways anger, good anger, bad anger, can manifest in relation to justice, right? Perceptions of justice. And remember, we characterize justice as, and this is a minimal characterization, a lot more could be said. We could spend an entire semester thinking about justice. But remember, we said justice requires a recognition of equality and inequality. So we treat equals equally, and we treat unequals unequally when appropriate. To treat equals unequally can be a case of injustice, and to treat unequals equally can be a case of injustice. In Numbers chapter 12, and focusing on verses 1 through 15, God's anger is aroused when Aaron, the brother of Moses, and Miriam, the sister of Moses, when they speak against their brother Moses, who is a servant of God, to whom God speaks face to face. Aaron and Miriam, they speak badly against Moses. They're spreading rumors about Moses. They want Moses, they're trying to take him down. They're tearing him down in their hearts. They're tearing him down in their speech and actions. There's an injustice here. And I think one way of characterizing the injustice is that Aaron and Miriam are treating Moses as if they were equal with him in the eyes of God. Now, I'm not saying that they're totally unequal. God sees them both, as all of them, as made in his image. They have a base level equality, let's say. But they have different roles. In the economy of salvation, in God's plan to save his people, the people of Israel, Moses occupies a role in that plan that is different from the role that Aaron and Miriam occupy. There's a kind of inequality here, but it's not an injustice. There have to be different roles in order for jobs to get done. And so Aaron and Miriam seem to be refusing to acknowledge this. God set apart Moses to accomplish a particular thing. And so Aaron and Miriam are annoyed. They're angry at this the fact that Moses occupies a different role. And their anger is a violation of the demands of justice. And it incites the righteous anger of the Lord. They wanted to be treated as Moses was, and they were offended that they were not. When we fail to recognize the different roles and gifts of others and ourselves, we're prone to commit injustices in our hearts and actions, and God's anger is aroused. Right? We often are frustrated that other people get to be in these other roles, and guess what happens? We fail to be thankful and grateful for the roles that we play in God's story of the world. A remedy for this is to direct our anger not towards mistreatment of us, not towards perceptions of injustice against us, but to direct our anger towards mistreatment of God and God's people. So not focus on ourselves, but think about cases where God is maligned, where God is slandered, where his name, right, is taken in vain, where it's carried by people in a way that dishonors him. This is why, by the way, this story of Aaron and Miriam is a great example of why some people in the tradition worry about anger. Because in most cases, our anger is like Aaron and Miriam's and doesn't resemble God's anger in any way. It's about us and how we are treated, and not about God and how he is treated, or about others and how they are treated. Here's another interesting example. So think about it like this. In the case of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, what we have are Aaron and Miriam fail to recognize an inequality and a difference in the roles that they have. And so theirs is a fascinating case, it seems to me, of anger gone wrong because they want unequals to be treated identically, equally. Here's a different case. In Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 through 21, Paul gets angry. Let me quote from it. But when Cephas, that's Peter, by the way, when Cephas came to Antioch, I, Paul, opposed him to his face because he had clearly done wrong. Until certain people came from James, he had been eating with the Gentiles. Peter had been eating with the Gentiles. But when these other people arrived, Peter stopped doing this and separated himself because he was afraid of those who were pro-circumcision. And the rest of the Jews also joined with him in this hypocrisy, so that even Barnabas was led astray with them by their hypocrisy. But when I, Paul, saw that they were not behaving consistently with the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter in front of them all, if you, although you are a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you try to force the Gentiles to live like Jews? Think about what's going on in this story. Paul is clearly angry. Think about the language he uses. I opposed him to his face. Those are like fighting words. Paul is clearly angry. He's incensed at Peter and some of the others. Why? Because they're behaving unjustly. How so? Well, they're treating some of the Christians very differently than others, and all on the basis of a difference in their race or ethnicity. And Paul's outraged at this. This is a perversion of justice in the most important matter, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Paul's anger is about Peter's turning equals or treating equals unequally. It's not about himself. He's defending the gospel. Now, we might get angry at genuine injustices, and yet our anger does not do anything constructive. Think about Paul. Paul's anger is meant to correct. It's meant to change Peter's heart and the other people's heart, and it's meant to rectify an injustice in the treatment of other Christians. Paul's anger is ultimately about building up, not tearing down. That's not the goal. But oftentimes, our anger is really just about destruction. And in this way, anger might be related. In some of these cases, it might reveal vainglory. So anger and vainglory can be related. Think about the phenomena that people are talking about more and more, virtue signaling. Sometimes displays of anger are ways of telling the world, look at me, I'm righteous, I'm good, I'm holy, I'm on the right side of history, as people say. But in some of these cases, I'm not saying all of these cases, I don't know people's hearts, and nor do you. So the focus here is on your heart, my heart, not everybody else's heart. But in some of these cases, my anger, my signaling to the world that I'm angry at this thing may actually just simply be empty. Why? What am I doing to bring about growth? Am I building up, or am I contributing to destruction? Am I just wanting people to recognize that I'm on their team? And there's no genuine love or sacrifice that I'm willing to undergo in order to bring about justice. Let's think about healthy anger then. Healthy anger always is seeking the reestablishment of justice. Right? Anger, when it's properly portrayed, should always work towards bringing about justice. It's never destructive. It's always constructive. It's building up, not tearing down. But when our anger is disordered, destruction is always happening, either to us or to the object that we are angry at. We get angry too easily, too intensely, and for too long. Let me give you an example from my own life. Now, I've struggled with anger since I was very young. And one way this manifests is when I'm driving. So, some of you have experienced it. You're driving down the road, then all the cars are sort of merging to the right or to the left. You look ahead, way off in the distance, you can see signs or pylons on the highway, right, blocking a lane, and so everyone's supposed to be moving over. You, me, as a good citizen, we move over into the lane as soon as we recognize that we're supposed to, and we wait patiently with everybody else. And then, I know you've experienced this, maybe I'm talking about you actually, and then some car in this empty lane that's supposed to be empty because it's blocked off, some car drives down the lane all the way to the front where the pylons are, where they can't drive any further, and then puts on their blinker and tries to cut in. Is that familiar to you? Is this story familiar? These kinds of things drive me nuts. I get very angry when this happens. I'm getting better. Please pray for me. But this has happened a number of times. In fact, there was one occasion where the line was so incredibly long, so incredibly slow. Cars are just flying by in this empty lane. I pulled over into the empty lane and stopped. I just stopped. I wasn't going to allow cars to do that anymore. Now look, as you can see, I'm still kind of angry about these sorts of things. I think my anger is a bit too long. It's lasted way too long. I think it's too intense. It doesn't match the injustice of the situation. Now, is there an injustice? Yeah, I do think there's an injustice. People are not treating others fairly. They're not treating equals equally in these cases. Right? This is people, I think there's cowardice involved here. Those same people would never do that at the grocery store. They wouldn't go to Target and just cut in line if there's a long line there. Why? Because they're not protected by their metal cage in a car. So I think there's a problem. There is an injustice, but my reaction to it is way too intense. So in this example, right, we see how anger can just easily go wrong. Right? My anger in this case, it's too intense. It's lasted way too long. And so, even though I've perceived an injustice, my anger is disordered. And guess who gets damaged the most? Me. I do. Or the people in my vicinity. They're getting damaged. In these sorts of cases, the problem is not that we're misperceiving the world. It's that our reaction to the perception is off.